You ever see someone so bold, so outrageously entitled, that for a moment you wonder if you're stuck in a prank show or trapped in some surreal dream? That was me on a Thursday morning, groggy and barely conscious, standing by my living room. Window in pajama pants, a worn t-shirt, and holding a chipped mug of lukewarm coffee. The sky was overcast, that dull kind of gray that makes everything feel like it's still half asleep, and I had no real plans for the day beyond catching up on emails and maybe mowing the lawn if motivation struck. But then, something strange caught my eye. A large flatbed tow truck was backing into my driveway. Not just idling near the curb or making a U-turn, no, this guy was slowly and deliberately reversing down my actual driveway, the one that leads directly to my garage. My car, a cherry red 2016 Toyota Camry, was parked neatly in its usual spot. At first, I assumed the truck driver had the wrong address, maybe a GPS glitch, maybe someone across the street had called them, and they got confused. It happens. So I stepped closer to the window, trying to see who he was talking to or what his plan was. And that's when I saw her, a woman I didn't recognize, mid-50s, short platinum blonde bob, sunglasses too big for her face, and a posture that screamed manager energy, was standing next to the truck, clipboard in hand. She was gesturing confidently, pointing at my car as if she were directing a construction crew. Even from behind the glass, I could hear the tone of her voice, that clipped, authoritative cadence, the kind people use when they think the world should bend to their will. I blinked, not quite believing what I was seeing. My first thought was, no way. She's not trying to tow my car. She couldn't be. But my second thought was more immediate. I need to get out there, now. I threw on a hoodie, slipped into my sneakers without socks, and practically ran out the front door. "Hey, what the hell is going on here?" I shouted, as I stepped onto the porch. The truck driver paused, already halfway to lowering the hook. The woman turned to face me, a tight, smug smile spreading across her lips. "Oh, you must be the tenant," she said, looking me up and down like I'd just tracked mud across a museum floor. "We've had complaints about this vehicle being parked illegally." I was too stunned to reply for a moment. "Illegally? I'm in my own driveway." She held up her clipboard as if that explained everything. "This is a private neighborhood," she said, in the same tone someone might use to explain why you can't bring outside food into a five-star restaurant. "You're violating HOA guidelines." I blinked again. "We don't have an HOA. Now, for context, I've lived in this house for 5 years. It's not a rental. I own it. I bought it outright after saving for years, and I deliberately chose this neighborhood because it didn't have an HOA. I didn't want some overzealous committee telling me what color I could paint my door or when I could put out my trash cans. So I knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that there was no homeowners association, no board, no rules, and certainly no Karen with a clipboard enforcing fantasy laws. She didn't flinch. "Well, we're organizing one now," she said confidently. "The previous owner of my house told me I'd be in charge of parking enforcement, so I'm just doing my duty." "Your house?" I asked, and then it clicked. She was the one who'd moved in across the street earlier that week. I'd seen the moving truck, seen her directing the movers like a foreman at a construction site. She hadn't introduced herself, hadn't waved at any neighbors. She'd just arrived, unpacked, and apparently declared herself sheriff of the block. "Lady," I said slowly, trying to keep my voice calm. "You've lived here, what, 2 days? You don't get to start towing people's cars, especially when they're parked on their own property." She sniffed, clearly unimpressed. "This isn't just about you, it's about maintaining standards. I've seen the kind of vehicles that get parked here. Old pickups, that motorcycle down the road that never moves, junk. This isn't a junkyard." I stared at her. My Camry was maybe a little dusty, but it was in perfect working condition. No dents, no rust. Just a regular, well-maintained car. "You're out of your mind," I muttered. Then I turned to the tow truck driver. You're not actually going to hook that up, are you? He looked uncertain. She said she was with the HOA, showed me some papers. She's not. There is no HOA. I own this house. That's my car. Call the cops if you don't believe me. He hesitated, then slowly backed away from the car. Yeah, maybe let's get that sorted first. Karen wasn't done. You're interfering with community procedures, she said, sharply. You're going to regret this when the board is fully established. I couldn't help but laugh, actually laugh out loud. Are you hearing yourself? You're threatening me with a homeowners association that doesn't exist. In a neighborhood where no one asked you to be in charge. Just then, my neighbor from next door, an elderly man named Mr. Patel, stepped outside to see what the commotion was. I waved him over and explained what was happening. His eyes widened, and he shook his head. She tried to tell me my mailbox was the wrong height yesterday, he whispered to me. I thought she was just being friendly. Karen must have realized the tide was turning because she huffed, slapped her clipboard against her thigh, and said, Fine. You got lucky this time. But don't expect this behavior to go unnoticed. She turned and marched back across the street, tow truck rumbling away behind her. I stood there, watching her disappear into her house like a sitcom villain retreating until next week's episode. The silence left behind was almost surreal. Mr. Patel chuckled and said, Looks like we've got ourselves a new neighborhood mascot. I nodded slowly. Yeah, and I have a feeling this isn't the last we've seen of her. But even then, even as I shook my head and went back inside, I didn't expect what came next. After the bizarre standoff with Karen in my driveway, I figured that was the end of it. She got embarrassed. The tow truck left without my car, and I went back inside thinking she'd stew in her little kingdom of imagined authority. I even chuckled to myself later that day. People like her usually get bored and move on when no one plays their game. Right? Wrong. The next morning started off normal enough. I slept in, had a decent breakfast, even managed to fix a leaky faucet in the guest bathroom. But as I was taking the trash out, I noticed something odd. Karen's SUV was parked across the street, but angled in a way that made it look like she was watching my house. Her curtains were slightly parted, and I swear I saw the glint of binoculars. For the next 2 days, nothing major happened. But she was watching. Every time I pulled into the driveway or opened the garage, there was a pair of eyes lurking behind the glass. She'd come out to get her mail when I was outside, just coincidentally. She'd walk her dog, some tiny yappy fluff ball that looked like it hated its own existence, right up to the edge of my lawn and just stand there like she was waiting for something. Maybe for me to tell her off so she could start a new drama. I didn't give her the satisfaction. Then came the flyers. Printed on cheap paper, in Comic Sans font, because of course, were notices about an emergency community meeting regarding residential vehicle management. It was hilarious. She had written up a whole page about protecting the value and appearance of our neighborhood and how unregistered and unsightly vehicles were harming the image of our block. She signed it. Karen Hill, acting HOA chairperson. Acting HOA chairperson. There was no HOA. There never had been. But she had handed out these flyers like they were gospel, stuffing them in every mailbox, including mine. I watched her do it through the peephole, arms swinging with purpose, as if she were saving us from ourselves. My neighbor Rosa from 2 houses down stopped me later that day. You get one of these flyers? She asked, holding hers like it might give her a rash. Yeah, I said, trying not to laugh. She told me my husband's truck would be first on the list if he didn't move it to the backyard. He's a firefighter. He's on call, all the time. What is wrong with her? I had no answer. I just shrugged. But deep down, I had a feeling it was all leading somewhere, like she was building up to a bigger moment. And I was right. That moment came one afternoon when I was working from home. I was on a Zoom call, earbuds in, when I heard a loud knock at the door, sharp, impatient. I muted my mic, walked over, and opened it to find Karen standing there like a postal inspector, clipboard in hand again. "We need to talk," she said. "No, we really don't," I replied, already starting to close the door. She shoved a paper in the gap. "You're violating Section 3B of the neighborhood parking policy." I looked at the paper. It was the same nonsense from the flyer, but now she'd added sections, clauses, and even a fake logo, some kind of stylized tree that looked suspiciously like it had been lifted from a landscaping company's website. "I told you already, there's no HOA here." "That's what you think," she said smugly. "But we're forming one. I have 5 signatures already." "Out of 28 houses? That's a quorum." "That's not how a quorum works," I said. "Also, you can't retroactively enforce fake rules." "You're being combative," she said, narrowing her eyes. "That attitude isn't going to help you when we vote on fines." I stared at her. "Are you threatening to fine me for parking in my own driveway?" Didn't answer directly. "You've been warned," she said, and turned on her heel. It would have been laughable if it weren't so creepy. The way she believed in her fantasy rulebook was unsettling. She didn't just act like she was in charge, she genuinely believed she was. And that belief made her dangerous, in a small, petty dictator kind of way. So, I decided to cover my bases. I printed out the deed to my property, the city zoning laws, and confirmation from the town hall that there was no active homeowners association in our neighborhood. I kept the documents in a folder by the front door, just in case. I even let the local police department know about the incident with the tow truck, just so there was a record of it. The officer on the phone chuckled when I explained the situation. "Let us know if she escalates," he said. "Sounds like you've got a real character on your hands." I thought things might die down after that. But of course they didn't. One morning, I was walking to my mailbox when Karen appeared seemingly out of thin air, her dog bouncing along beside her like a furry satellite. "You still haven't moved your car," she said, not even pretending to be friendly. "I don't have." 2. "It's parked legally. It's on my property." "We'll see what the city says when they get my complaint." I raised an eyebrow. "You're reporting me to the city?" "Already did," she said with that smug smirk again. "Code enforcement." "We'll take it from here." Spoiler alert. They never came. At this point, I started noticing other neighbors getting irritated too. One day, I saw Mr. Patel standing in his yard with a tape measure. Apparently, Karen had told him his fence violated visibility standards. He was humoring her out of politeness, but I could see the frustration on his face. Rosa, meanwhile, had started parking her husband's truck further down the block just to avoid confrontation. The whole street felt tense, like we were all living in a suburban thriller, and Karen was the villain everyone wanted to ignore, but couldn't. Then came the kicker. A week after her failed attempt to tow my car, she called the police, again. This time claiming I was running an unauthorized auto repair business from my garage. I was literally just rotating my tires and playing music while I did it. When the officer arrived, he looked confused. "I'm just here because someone reported." "I don't even know, man," he said, clearly uncomfortable. "Let me guess. Karen?" He sighed. "Ma'am across the street?" "Yep." He looked around, saw the tire jack and my open toolbox, then shrugged. "Looks like basic maintenance to me. Sorry to bother you." I thanked him, and he left. Karen, watching from across the street, slammed her front door so hard I could hear it echo. At that point, I knew she wasn't going to stop. She was trying to bait me, trying to make me retaliate, do something rash so she could play the victim. But I wasn't going to play her game. I was going to wait. Watch. Let her dig her own grave. Because with people like Karen, it's only a matter of time before they go too far. And when she did, I'd be ready. It started like any other Saturday morning, birds chirping, sun filtering through the blinds, and the smell of freshly brewed coffee drifting through the house. I was feeling optimistic, hopeful even that maybe, just maybe, Karen had gotten bored. Maybe she'd shifted her attention to enforcing imaginary rules on someone else. Maybe she'd found a new hobby that didn't involve stalking my driveway. Wishful thinking. I was halfway through my coffee when I decided to step outside to grab the newspaper. Yes, I still get a physical paper. Don't judge me. But the moment. I opened the front door. That hopeful bubble popped with the sharpness of a nail through a tire. Her car. Karen's car. That shiny silver SUV she was so proud of parked directly across my driveway. Not beside it. Not even sort of adjacent. No. This thing was nose to tail blocking me in. It straddled the sidewalk, its back bumper barely a foot from my garage door. For a second, I thought it might be a mistake. Maybe she was loading something, or her car broke down. But no, that would have required a shred of human decency. Stuck to my windshield, flapping in the soft breeze, was a piece of printer paper. I peeled it off and read the message, typed in all caps like she was shouting in digital format. If you want to live in a community, start acting like it. Stop abusing driveway space. Park elsewhere. No name, no signature, but it didn't. Need one. I stood there for a moment, dumbfounded. Then the absurdity of it all sank in, and I started laughing. Not a cheerful laugh, more of a, "What fresh hell is this?" laugh. The kind of laugh that keeps you from screaming. It was an escalation, no doubt. She'd gone from calling tow trucks and reporting fake violations to actually blocking my access to my own house. This wasn't a power trip anymore. This was personal. And if she thought I was going to back down or start parking around the corner like a beaten dog, she had severely underestimated me. I could have called the police. I could have reported her for obstructing private property, for parking illegally, for harassment. But honestly, that felt too easy, too impersonal. Karen had taken this feud to a ridiculous level, and it was time I responded in kind. But smartly, quietly, legally. So I called a tow company. Not just any tow company, the same company she had brought to my driveway a week prior. I still had the card the driver handed me when he realized what was going on. His name was Eric, and thankfully, he remembered the incident vividly. "She tried to have your car towed?" he said over the phone. "You're kidding." "Nope. She's blocked my driveway now. Her SUV's sitting right there like she owns the place." He chuckled. "Sounds like karma's come knocking. Think you can help me return the favor?" "You?" "Got it," he said. "Send me a photo of the car in your driveway and a shot of the license plate. If it's blocking a private drive, we're good to go." I did exactly that. Sent him the pictures, including the passive-aggressive note she left on my windshield. Less than 10 minutes later, I heard the familiar diesel rumble of a tow truck approaching. I watched from the window as Eric's truck turned the corner and rolled up to my house like a knight in grimy armor. The truck reversed smoothly down the street, the hydraulic bed already lowering as Eric hopped out. I stepped outside and nodded. "She's all yours." He took one look at the SUV and whistled. "She really parked like this on purpose?" "Apparently I need to learn how to live in a community." He shook his head and got to work. Within minutes, her car was halfway onto the flatbed. He worked fast and efficient, like a man who'd done this 1,000 times, which, judging by his calm demeanor, he probably had. Just as he was securing the back wheels, I heard it. A screech of tires followed by the sound of a door slamming. I turned to see Karen storming down her front steps in a floral robe, slippers smacking the pavement with every step. Her face was flushed, mouth already open as she launched into a shrill tirade. "What do you think you're doing? That's my car." Eric didn't even flinch. "Ma'am, this vehicle is illegally parked across a private driveway. Property owner requested removal. Everything's documented." "You can't tow my car. I live here. This is harassment. This is..." "Theft!" I stepped forward. Karen, you parked in front of my garage. You left me a note telling me to park elsewhere. You blocked my only way in and out of my own home. You could have knocked. You could have spoken to me like an adult. You didn't give me that courtesy when you tried to have my car taken away, I replied calmly. Remember, you showed up with this same tow truck like you were Judge Judy. Consider this a friendly reminder that you're not above the rules. Her mouth opened and closed like she wanted to argue, but couldn't find the words. She looked to Eric, who had just finished strapping her wheels in. "I'm calling the police!" she shrieked. Eric just shrugged. "They'll tell you the—" "Same thing. You parked illegally on private property. This isn't your driveway. It's not even public street parking. You blocked access to a residence." "I didn't block it. He could have squeezed out on the side." "You want to test that argument in traffic court?" I asked. That finally shut her up for a second. She stood there, seething, as Eric climbed into the truck and fired up the engine. The tow truck lurched forward, Karen's silver SUV rising higher as the truck pulled away. "You'll regret this," she called after me. "This isn't over." I took a long sip of my coffee and said, without looking at her, "You're right. It's probably not. But next time, I'll just have it impounded." I turned and walked back into the house, the door clicking shut behind me like the end of a chapter. The rest of the day was surprisingly quiet. No mysterious knocks on the door, no shouting, no passive-aggressive notes. Karen didn't come back out. And for the first time in over a week, I felt like I could breathe. I knew this wasn't the final round. People like her don't go down easy. But something had changed. I wasn't playing defense anymore. And now that she knew I wouldn't be bullied, the game was no longer fun for her. Let her call the cops. Let her print more flyers. Let her hold imaginary board meetings in her living room. I'd be here, waiting, watching, and parked exactly where I belonged. It had been a few days since Karen's SUV had been ceremoniously towed from in front of my garage, and the neighborhood had entered an eerie sort of peace. I say eerie because while everything appeared calm on the surface, no barking demands, no threats of imaginary HOA sanctions, no more surveillance from her window, there was a distinct tension in the air. It felt like the pause between thunderclaps during a storm, that waiting stillness when you just know something's coming. Karen hadn't said a word to me since the tow. She hadn't come knocking, hadn't dropped off any more poorly worded. Notices hadn't even yelled from across the street. But her silence wasn't surrender. It was calculation. She was regrouping, planning, figuring out how to strike back in a way she thought would put her on top again. I underestimated her, just slightly. I didn't think she had it in her to escalate past public tantrums and made-up rules. But as it turns out, Karen was more vindictive than I gave her credit for. One morning I came out to find my garbage cans knocked over, trash scattered across my front lawn like some raccoon riot had taken place. Only it wasn't raccoons. Every piece of trash was selected. Every scrap of paper bore my name or address. Old bills, junk mail, packaging. Things that had been inside the sealed bags. The bags themselves had been deliberately slit open with something sharp. I knew immediately who had done it. There was no other explanation. No one else had a reason to come onto my property and meticulously gut my garbage like that. But I didn't have proof. No cameras, no witnesses. Just the growing realization that Karen wasn't going to stop until she broke something. My car, my peace, or my patience. I spent the morning cleaning up the mess, muttering to myself about petty adults acting like playground bullies. I considered installing cameras, filing a report, even putting up one, of those obnoxious "smile, you're on camera" signs. But something told me that as satisfying as that might be, it wouldn't solve the underlying issue. Karen needed to lose. Not just be thwarted, she needed to lose. She needed to realize she wasn't queen of the cul-de-sac, that she couldn't manipulate the world into obeying her fictional hierarchy. And I was going to give her that lesson, whether she liked it or not. So I started doing my homework. I dug into property records, zoning laws, nuisance ordinances, even obscure municipal codes. I researched the boundaries of public and private property, took screenshots of everything, and kept a folder organized and ready. But the real jackpot came when I started talking to the neighbors. Turns out, I wasn't the only one on Karen's hit list. Rosa's husband had received 3 citations for parking his truck too close to the curb, all unsigned but clearly Karen's handiwork. Mr. Patel down the street said she'd reported him for a dangerously tall hedge. The Johnsons had a toddler's birthday party ruined when she called in a noise complaint at 4 in the afternoon. Everyone had a story. Some minor, some infuriating, but all with the same villain. So I suggested something. What if we held a real meeting? I asked Rosa one afternoon. Invite everyone. Talk about what she's been doing. Get it all in the open. You mean like a community meeting? Exactly. Not to yell. Not to start a witch hunt. Just to compare notes and, formally agree that she doesn't speak for the neighborhood. It took 2 days of door-knocking and polite explanations. But we got a solid turnout. 14 households agreed to come. We set up chairs on my lawn, printed out copies of the various incidents, even made a small presentation. It felt weirdly official, more organized than anything Karen had ever attempted, and just as we were setting up, guess who came stomping? Across the street, you can't just hold a meeting without notifying the association, she shouted. What association? Rosa asked innocently. Karen's eyes narrowed. The HOA. There is no HOA, Mr. Patel said firmly. Karen's voice hit that familiar shrill pitch. There will be. I've been working on the paperwork. You can't form an HOA after the fact, I said, stepping forward. Not without unanimous agreement. Not in this neighborhood. We checked the law. She looked around at the gathering crowd. More than a dozen of us, some holding printouts of her fake citations. A few were filming. She saw it. She knew. You're all just ganging up on me, she hissed. Because I care about this neighborhood. Because I care about order. No, I said calmly. Because you're bullying people. And no one wants to live under your imaginary rule book. She stared at me, red-faced, fists clenched at her sides. Then, without another word, she turned and stormed back to her house, slamming the door behind her so hard a bird flew off the power line above. That night, we talked, we laughed, we swapped stories, shared snacks, and made plans for an actual neighborhood group. A casual, friendly one. No fines, no fake violations. Just a WhatsApp chat, a few basic agreements, and the shared understanding that no one gets to appoint themselves dictator. In the weeks that followed, Karen became quieter. No more threats, no more tow trucks, no more roving lectures about property lines and lawn lengths. Her windows stayed shut. Her dog walks became shorter. Whatever fight she had left in her had clearly fizzled after the meeting. But the best moment? The cherry on top? A city inspector showed up at her door one sunny morning. Someone had filed an anonymous complaint about unpermitted renovations. Something about a shed built too close to the property line. It wasn't me. I swear. But karma has a funny way of making house calls. I watched from my window as she tried to talk her way out of it, gesturing wildly with a rolled-up blueprint in one hand. The inspector didn't budge. He wrote something on a form and handed it to her. She looked like she was about to scream. I smiled and sipped my coffee. Maybe now, finally, she understood what it felt like to be on the other end of the clipboard. And me? I still park right in my driveway, right where I belong.